Today I almost ran over a baby turtle.
What's the fine on that one?
No, it's true. Like there was like this tiny little baby turtle totally stopped my bike as quickly as I could. This other guy was like running flat footed and I was like, stop, stop. And he's like, don't tell me to stop. And like missed this baby turtle by inches. And the poor thing was heading to like Collins Boulevard where the clubs are because it didn't even know where the ocean was.
Thanks. Did you rescue it? Did
I
you
did.
give it a free ride? Good. I'm proud of
I
you.
did. I put it on like a big leaf and carried him out to the water. And the minute he started, I say he, I don't know, it looked like a he to me, started hearing the water, you could see him getting really excited. And I
Nice.
mean, his chances are 1 in a gajillion, but better than being on Collins Avenue.
True that. See, you can do that on a bike. In this economy at these gas prices, I'm not helping any turtles. I'm just going to go right
No,
around it, get to work.
I picked the perfect time. I picked the perfect time to stop driving and eating less meat. It's like this has been the
Yes,
best
yes, you did.
inflationary session for me in my life.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear it.
Mind you, I don't remember the last time there was inflation like this. The last time there was really inflation like this was in the 70s when I was born, into the 80s, but I don't remember it. But it's on everybody's mind.
Yeah, it's my parents told me a little bit about it, but even they were, still kind of children, didn't really have the responsibility of paying for anything then.
No, I mean, far
But
and
this
away,
is
the largest question we're getting from clients today is what are you doing about inflation and what's going on with it? And so that's what we're always talking about it.
yeah, definitely. And it's crazy because it went from a thing where it was always in the background for the insiders, where you always heard people talk about inflation targets and where we are with it. But now it's front and center, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and all the newspapers. So it's kind of inescapable right now.
Well, and the Fed has been trying to get inflation since 2009. All of their efforts have been to get inflation, to get economic growth, and sure enough, they got it.
Yeah, and they got it, but how do you go from a 2% inflation target all the way up to 8%? Like, what does that road look like
It
in the
looks
long
like
term?
COVID. Oops.
Yeah,
Yeah, it looks like COVID. It looks like supply chain issues, closed down China still, a war in Russia. And as careful as the Fed has tried to be, it all happened at one time. And the masters of the universe couldn't control it. So we're at 9% at what's our base is 9%, but everything else is, I mean, there's other stuff a lot higher than that. What's energy at? What's that? 30?
yeah, energy's up 34%, and in the South, where you and I know it's very hot, it's actually up like closer to 40.
Yeah. Yeah. Try living without AC.
True that.
So
Yeah, but I mean, it's
yeah. Yeah.
well, I was also saying, I got a wedding to go to at the end of the year, and airlines in the last, I bought my tickets about 2 months ago. When I got the announcement, I was like, it's California, it's far off in the future. Let's just get a good price. That same ticket now is like $400 more per ticket.
Wow. Yeah. And you're lucky to get
Yeah.
there. You're lucky to get there because
Yeah.
people might not show up because
Mm-hmm.
apparently working these days is just a luxury.
I guess
Not a
there's like,
necessity because the unemployment rate is so low. So that brings us to why is recession such a big deal? Because that's everywhere.
right.
And normally, did I say why is recession such a big deal or inflation?
Recession. But
See?
inflation, I mean, they're both big deals. That's all right.
No, I mean, that's it because that's the same thing. Normally we're worried about inflation because I think what's different, I think the big concern about inflation right now isn't just so much that prices get so high, but that the Fed doesn't want it to be at 9% and they are going to raise interest rates. And when the Fed raises interest rates and they continue to raise interest rates, because that's the only tool, the main tool that they have, that it's going to cause a recession. So they are at this time one and the same.
Right. And, I have a quote from this morning. I was reading the journal and, Fed Chair Powell said, we're not trying to provoke and do not think we will need to provoke a recession, but we do think it's absolutely essential. And he's referring to, raising interest rates to bringing down inflation. And that's kind of crazy because the conversation started off as like, hey, things get a little hot, Fed's going to have to act. And now it's like, well, if the Fed acts, do we get a recession? And he has to address it directly, which is different than it usually is.
And it's a real risk that they're going to cause a recession. And that's normally where the
Mhm.
argument or the whole thing stops, is this whole thing builds up like, well, we're going to have a recession. We're going to have a recession. We're going to have a recession. What are you going to do about it? And
Mhm.
at the same time, what are we going to do about inflation as investment managers? And normally with inflation, they have these tools you can use. You could buy tips. Those are treasury bonds that move with inflation. But they're also bonds. And we know bonds don't do well as the Fed is raising rates, even if there's inflation. You could buy
Right.
gold, but you know how I feel about the pet rock.
And
And
it just hasn't done well, right?
it
Like
hasn't
we
done
haven't
well.
seen it do what it's advertised.
And it hasn't done well. And so really the only way you get out of inflation is you outgrow it. And the way that you outgrow
Mhm.
inflation is to add more risk to your portfolio. But at this time, the idea is that that the inflation may cause a recession. So do you really want to add more risk at the very time you think that there's going to be a recession? It's a bit of a conundrum.
Right. Do you think these recessions don't last long, right? So like the old technical definition was 2 quarters. That's like, you know, that's 3 months plus another 3 months of decline GDP growth. Nowadays, there's a new definition. It's like any general slowdown where you can see the data change. But really, the market is really kind of gets ahead of it, right? So if the market sees a recession, sometimes it can go down, sometimes it can rise before the recession is even over. Is the best thing to do just stay the course
Well,
and
I
ride it
mean,
out?
those definitions were the minimum length in order to be considered a recession. They can go longer. But what's
Right.
interesting about it is that we forget, or a lot of times investors forget, that not every recession is as terrible as 2008, 2009. And in fact, 2008 and 2009 was a financial crisis. There was fraud in the system, and that fraud caused a recession. And it was a terrible one. But not all recessions are that terrible, and they're a natural part of life, and we need recessions. To think that a recession is going to be a return to 2008, 2009 is entirely possible, but isn't a necessary how it happens. And I think I want to defend recessions this morning. I'm going to take an unpopular stance. I'm going to defend a recession.
Okay, give it to me. Why would we need a recession in this economy?
Well, recessions are natural. They happen. We haven't had one
Yep.
since 2008, 2009, unless you count the really short one with COVID in 2020. They flush out businesses that are no longer viable. And if you look around, there are a lot of businesses you're like, how are they even still making money and making lots of it? Recessions cause deflation, and deflation just simply being the opposite of inflation, lowering of prices, which would be good because things are really expensive out there.
Right.
And I mean, what was your quote? How did you describe it? You said something. We were just talking about this a minute ago.
Yeah, no, I think there's like a classic quote from Harry Truman. And he said, a recession is when your neighbor loses his job, and a depression is when you lose yours.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I wasn't
Yeah.
even thinking of that. Yeah. That's the Harry Truman. And then Reagan said the same thing, but a recovery. What recovery is when Carter loses his job? Isn't that?
Yes, exactly. Which is legendary.
The first actor we had as a president. Yes. Legendary quote. So that's my defense, is it rings out a lot of the excess.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll go back to the other point that yes, recessions are painful, and people lose jobs, and there's real human suffering. But I would argue right now, there's a ton of human suffering with the amount of inflation we have in the market.
Right. Like the inflation's almost the leading indicator, right? Like in some recessions, things get bad, they take a while, people lose their jobs slowly, and that's when it hurts. But this is really, I think 100% of people feel inflation, whereas, there's a 5% unemployment rate, only 5% of people feel that pain. So that may be an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, the way I think about it is, so I'm in my new office in Miami, and the people here
Mhm.
who clean the place or work at the front desk, they're all driving in. They're not walking from
Right.
down the street, and they're paying for gas.
Yeah.
And that's expensive. And they can't, and some of them can't afford to buy a house because it's really expensive to buy a house. And then people in earlier generations right now, or younger generations right now, can't buy a house, and rent is really high. And so everything is
Yeah.
just, a level set would not be the end of the world. A shallow recession would not be bad. Um, yeah, I think you just need to be, it's something to be concerned about, but I'm not afraid of it right now.
Well, that's good. But I really have two questions. Is one is, are we even going to have a recession? Like, I think everyone assumes we are, but there's a real situation where we don't.
That's thank you for saying that. Is that when everybody is saying we're going to have something, and especially in the markets, when everybody says something's going to happen, oftentimes it doesn't. It doesn't.
Right.
There's some type of likelihood at it, and depends on who you talk to. But there are
Mhm.
other scenarios that could happen that we can't anticipate. Maybe there'll be some type of conclusion to this war in Russia earlier than we thought. Gas will come online, lower prices. Maybe China will open their markets again and create global growth. Certainly they will. There's a lot of different things that could stave off a recession at this time. So it's
Mhm.
not for sure.
And
You're right.
then, oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, and assuming there is, right? So, like, let's go to the quote unquote base case. What do we do to protect against that?
What do you do to protect against inflation? Well, hopefully you've already done something. So what we did in the beginning of the year was really
Mhm.
concentrate our positions, or focus our positions on large US companies, right? That's what we did.
Mhm.
We focused on cash flow of ours, and we de-risked our portfolio, but we still stayed in the market. We still stayed in the market because we don't know if there will be a recession, and we're investing for the long term, which, by the way, our long-term numbers, and I say our long-term numbers of these markets, are phenomenal.
Right. So, Brad, it sounds like there are some positives to a recession. Are we rooting for one?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Not
We do
getting
not
jerseys
want
with it.
a recession.
Over the last 10 years, the S&P is up 183% total, right? That's well in excess of all the historical trends, right? So we've heard for a long time it's 7%, it's 8%. We're looking at over 10% annualized return of the S&P 500 for a decade, and that's really a period of growth that no other group of people have ever seen.
No, we haven't had a recession since 2008, 2009, unless you count 2020,
COVID
which
shock.
was the shortest recession on record. So it's going to happen. They're inevitable. This one potentially could be caused by inflation, but not inflation itself, but by the Federal Reserve reacting to inflation by increasing interest rates, which tightens up money, or makes it a little bit more difficult to borrow money, lowers the value of stocks. And so if we know a recession is unavoidable, then we position our portfolios to do so. We make sure we have enough cash on hand. We've always talked about rainy day funds. It's something that's been around forever, and it continues to happen. Um, it's year to date numbers seem a little bit scary, but thanks for putting them in context. When you put them in context, we're at a really good point, and we'll get through it. So, I mean, I guess that was my summary. Well, what would you finish on?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of talk in the market about, trying to point people to be afraid of things, right? And we talked a lot about, what really does it mean if there's a recession? What does it really mean if there's inflation? It doesn't mean people won't get hurt, because it's not a fun time for anyone. But I think when you zoom out a little bit, it's really hard. It's almost hard to remember 2008, because that was so many years ago. But we got through that too, and if it's not nearly as bad, that means we're going to get through it even quicker this time. So I just think it's a good time to take a breath. We have strategies. We talk to people every day. We're always trying to make sure that we're doing the right things proactively. Like you said, building a rainy day fund's a great one. So just taking a breath and appreciating the people around you, and some of the smaller things in life, because it's not all CNBC, red headlines and stuff like that. There's a lot of other positives that can come out of this as well.
So I want to put a bow on this because that's what I do. And so I'm wondering, is this turtle Jay Powell?
Did you save the economy?
Is he going? I saved the economy. Is he headed the wrong way? Is he lost, or are these, or is the turtles, are the investors chasing these headlines? But no, I like Jay Powell. He's just trying to make his way through all this news. He's data dependent. And somebody told him the ocean was the wrong way.
Yep, he's got a job to do, and he's going to get there, even if sometimes people got to pick him up and take him to the right place.
You got to ride on a leaf. Yeah, cool. All right, well, this was fun for our first call. We'll do it again.
Yeah, definitely.